Monster Monday, and that so happens to be the day that I like to talk about monsters. Hello and welcome to Monster Mondays. I'm Jeff Arbuckle, co-host of the podcast Film Seizure, that you can catch each Wednesday at filmseizure.com or at a number of podcast providers online. We're going north of the border this week for Ginger Snaps, an early 2000s werewolf film about a pair of teenage sisters fascinated by death. The movie was the brainchild of director John Fawcett and writer Karen Walton. Now, Fawcett wanted to do a horror film. Most specifically, he wanted something to do with metamorphosis, which usually means werewolf movie. He also wanted girls to be the main character, and Fawcett got his start making commercials and directing music videos before transitioning to mostly TV. And he is the co-creator of the BBC series Orphan Black that also won an Emmy for star Tatiana Maslany, who also appeared in the sequel to this film. Now, Fawcett is still working pretty regularly today, even though most of his stuff, again, is on TV. Karen Walton also has worked on Orphan Black as well as Queer as Folk. She resisted the idea of writing a horror film. She was well aware of the problem horror is often saddled with in terms of poor characterization, jump scares, just general negativity that's usually brought to the genre. Now, Fawcett convinced her by saying that his plan was for this movie to revolutionize the genre. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I will say that this is a very good movie. But she would look at the werewolf genre and see it was almost always guys wrestling with a beast within. She felt American Werewolf in London was a little better than most because it had an attitude that she liked. But it was, she was really won over by the idea that she could craft this movie with a woman's voice and with a male director completely and totally backing her and supporting what it was she was putting into the script. After clearing up some troubles with financing, the movie would go into production in late 2000. For the two leads, casting proved to be a little bit of a problem. Canadian casting directors didn't like horror. It also didn't help that the Columbine shooting in Colorado and another shooting in Alberta really kind of put a harsh light on outcast teens who often acted out in violent ways. This is a movie about a couple of outcast sisters and deals with werewolves. That is part troubled teens and a whole lot of acting out in violent ways. Finally, the two sisters were cast. First was Emily Perkins as Bridget Fitzgerald. Now, Perkins was already in her 20s, but looked really young for her age. She was pretty much already a fairly successful actress with a career that went back to 1989. But most significantly, she played the young version of Beverly Marsh in the 1990 miniseries of Stephen King's It. Opposite Perkins, and the one who will ultimately have a surprising amount of body hair for a woman by the end of this movie, is Catherine Isabelle as Ginger. Isabelle is fairly awesome. She played James Marsden's younger sister in the 1998 thriller Disturbing Behavior. But after Ginger Snaps, she'd go on to appear in Insomnia, Freddy vs. Jason, and then played the titular American Mary for the Soska sisters, which is a movie that is both kind of gross, but also really fascinating and very well made, and certainly would make fellow Canuck David Cronenberg proud. But this movie begins on a cold fall day in suburban Canada. A mother is raking leaves as her small child plays in the sandbox, and that small child uncovers a disembodied paw of their dog, which is then found practically ripped in half as if it was pulled from its gated doghouse. Teenager Bridget Fitzgerald is carrying a hedge trimmer, a gas can, and a torch, and she's on her way to her and her sister's Ginger's room. Now, the sisters talk about how that lady found her dog dead, and no one seemed to really care. The girls talk about their plan to be out of this town by the time they are both 16, or they will go through with a suicide pact. The girls often stage various gruesome death scenes and then take pictures as a hobby. And their pictures may be gruesome, but you gotta say they are pretty good at staging scenes and doing the makeup. But they are definitely a pair of spooky chicks nonetheless. What's more, they show their pictures to their classmates, mostly to the students' excitement, but not so much for the educators. The guys in their class are starting to particularly notice 16-year-old Ginger, as she is the slightly more noticeable as opposed to the more quiet, reserved, and mousy Bridget, who is just 15. The girls do often like to call out one of the girls in the class and imagine how they will ultimately die. One of the girls that they do this for, Trina, is a bit of a bully and body checks Bridget during a game of field hockey in gym class, and Ginger decides to get back at the bully, and the sisters decide to do so by kidnapping their dog, and they want to stage it like the fabled Beast of Bailey Downs tore it apart. Now, that night at dinner, the girl's mother, Pamela, played by Mimi Rogers, asks why Ginger's been nursing her lower back. And Ginger says she hurt her back being dead in one of their photo shoots. But Pamela thinks Ginger has cramps and having her first period. It is stated that both Ginger, like I said, who's 16, and Bridget, who's just 15, are 3 years late in menstruating. Later, the girls go to kidnap Trina's dog and find another dog disemboweled in the park. Just then, Ginger begins her period. The scent of the blood attracts the animal that has been causing all of the various maulings of neighborhood pets and animals, and Ginger is attacked and drug off by the beast. Bridget finds her and sees a hairy beast kind of claw and bite Ginger, and Ginger survives, and the girls escape the monster, and in pursuit, the creature is hit by the van of local drug dealer Sam and is killed. Bridget looks over Ginger's wounds, and Ginger is screaming about how bad it hurts, but her wounds don't actually hurt. All of the pain is internalized. In fact, the wounds heal themselves almost immediately, and Ginger even starts to calm down very quickly. Bridget wants to call 911, but Ginger begs her not to, and just make sure that their mother doesn't find out. Bridget pulls a picture out of her Polaroid camera that she used to fight back against the monster earlier and sees a dog-like creature in the picture, leading her to think that maybe something more supernatural is going on about the attack. Ginger's behavior begins to change quickly. She starts hanging out with a group of boys that have been commenting on her development and smoking weed with them. Trina's Rottweiler barks and attempts to attack Ginger. And what's more, Ginger's wounds begin sprouting hair. Bridget says that she was bitten by some sort of strange large animal on a full moon, and there's clearly something more going on than just her menstruation cycle. Ginger's attitudes are changing quite wildly as well. Oh, and she's also growing a tail. Soon, she begins to dress a little more provocatively and playing up her looks a little bit more. She also begins hanging out much more and flirting with Jason, the boy who's mostly been trying to get a date with the more dangerous and attractive Fitzgerald sister since the beginning. Sam tracks down Bridget and tries talking to her more about what it was that he hit with his van 3 weeks before. And they talk over how werewolves are typically dealt with, and Sam was able to kill it with his car. However, while lycanthropy can have some biological explanation about how it's pretty much a virus that changes the person from inside out, the reason why silver is usually mentioned in the old tales to deal with these things is because several cultures believe silver has purifying qualities. While on a date with Jason, Ginger becomes sexually aggressive and bites him, and she comes home bloodied and vomiting. And from the bloodlust, she also killed the neighbor's dog. The next day, Jason starts bleeding from his nether regions as well. As the next full moon approaches, Ginger's canine teeth start to sharpen and her sexual desires grow. Her temper also heats up when she defends Bridget again from another body check from Trina by beating the hell out of her. The sisters go to see Sam, and Sam believes it's Bridget that is turning into a werewolf and not Ginger. This is based on Bridget telling him that she was the one who was bitten by the monster. Later that night, Trina confronts Bridget about her missing dog, so Ginger defends her sister again, and in the ensuing brawl, Trina is accidentally killed. Later at school, Jason throws Bridget into a janitor closet and asks if Ginger is avoiding him. And he's transforming too. He says he's killed his own dog just for fun the night before. And he's also growing a tail. And so he obviously wants some answers. It is kind of funny that in some ways, Bridget kind of treats the passing of the lycanthropy almost like a sexually transmitted disease. Although we know that Ginger bit Jason. So it is kind of funny how Bridget views this as kind of a slightly less mature person as opposed to what we really know is going on with Ginger. But Bridget discovers their mother has real monk's hood from the craft store that isn't usually available before or after spring. And she takes it to Sam, who suggests injecting it would be the best way to cure the werewolfism, but he doesn't know what it will really do. He doesn't have any idea about dosage or side effects, but Bridget says she can't wait. She needs it. Meanwhile, Bridget has Ginger locked in the bathroom, and she is slowly banging and clawing her way out as she goes through her final transformations into a wolf girl. Ginger eventually gets out and goes to the school. Bridget finds Jason messing with a little kid and uses one of the doses of the monk's hood on him, and he immediately changes back to normal. So the suggested cure by Sam actually works. At school, the guidance counselor threatens to call Ginger's mother, so she kills him, and then when the janitor goes into the counselor's office and discovers the body, while Bridget was trying to get the materials to clean up the place. Ginger begins to love killing and the power that she's feeling that she has from her transformations. She even suggests Bridget could become like her, but Bridget says she would rather be dead than to become a monster like her sister. As Ginger goes to the big greenhouse Halloween party thrown by Sam, Pamela discovers the hidden body of Trina in the gardening shed, and she takes Bridget to the party to get Ginger. And Pamela says, just kind of offhandedly, that she'll light the house on fire and the girls will start over. I mean, their dad's only going to blame her anyway, so let's start anew, right? But Bridget and Sam take Ginger home, where Bridget has more of the cure that they concocted, but Ginger transforms into a full-on werewolf monster. While trying to make a plan to administer the cure, Sam is killed by Ginger, leaving Bridget to have to do this on her own. However, Bridget is also transforming slowly. She mixed Ginger's blood with hers when making a promise at the greenhouse party. And as Ginger turns her attention to Bridget, Bridget defends herself with a knife and also holding the syringe that has the cure inside it. And Ginger lunges at her sister and is stabbed by the knife. Ginger dies as Bridget lays next to her crying. So let's get to the 3 things I like about Ginger Snaps. First, I really like the setting of this movie. To start, it's set in the fall, and the movie actually ends with a Halloween party. So we have a little bit of atmosphere with howling winds and leaves rustling about and cold, dark nights. Then you have the suburban small town that is so small it's still basically being built. This isn't exactly the middle of nowhere, but these monster attacks are happening to a small community. It's not the typical werewolf movie that might happen in London or just out in the woods or at a castle or whatever. It definitely adds to this movie in small ways and really modernizes the movie in a lot of ways too. Second, there is a biting dark comedy to this movie that's also pretty great. I mean, obviously this is all an allegory for menstruation, becoming a woman, using those kind of powers and charms that a lot of people think women have when they mature, particularly when it comes to guys. And after all, menstrual cycles and full moon cycles are usually considered to be the same 28-day periods between the events. But beyond that, the way some characters speak their lines or act is actually fairly funny. The girl's mother is so typically kind of that suburban housewife mom and how she treats her little girls. It's as if she's one of the most aloof people on the planet. Jason's lines, once he begins changing into a wolf, is also fairly light and can lead to some chuckles with the way he delivers it. It's not common for people to say they killed their dog for fun. But then when he's cured, his goofy reaction to basically just being like, I need to go to class, and runs off to school, feels like it belongs more in a comedy. But all of that is nicely intermixed and balanced with the more serious and horror-related stuff. It's miles ahead and above other horror films of this same period of time for how it juggles the lighter stuff with the larger themes. And thirdly, Katharine Isabelle was made a star from this movie, and it's clear to see why. She turned 18 while making this movie, and she's almost presented as if she's passing from schoolgirl or adolescent to more of a mature adult woman in the way that she's made up and how she acts as the movie begins to play out, particularly as she's transforming. She is incredibly appealing and watchable as an actress, and it continues throughout her career. She's clearly the angrier and darker sister of the pair, and she has to carry a lot of weight in the movie itself. If she doesn't carry that load and be that watchable and attractive of a character, then the movie doesn't work. I could say something somewhat similar about Emily Perkins, who has to appropriately play the meek sister who needs to get enough strength and courage to deal with a literal monster in the town, who also happens to be the person she idolizes, her older sister. However, I would almost say that's at least a little bit of an easier job. You can kind of shrink into that kind of role. It does take both of these people, and even more so, it takes Katharine Isabelle transforming just as much as Ginger does as a character to make this work. And what's also great is that while this does have an element of an undertone that transformation from child to something more of a sexual young adult is not at all handled in a gross way. It's not, it doesn't have leering shots of Katharine Isabelle. She just kind of becomes a different person in the movie, and it's appropriately handled for the ages of these characters and the target audience for this. It's not overly, it's not overdone in terms of, oh, now she has to show a lot of skin or she has to be overtly sexy. She just transforms into a different person. It's far more nuanced and hits all the right points and notes for a serious horror movie about a pair of young girls going through changes. And that makes for a really compelling movie and a really interesting movie. That wraps up this week's Monster Mondays. You can catch new episodes of Monster Mondays each Monday at filmseizure.com. But don't forget to follow Film Seizure at Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to Film Seizure to get both the Film Seizure podcast and Monster Mondays at your favorite podcast providers, as well as YouTube. You can also check out my website, bmovieenema.com, to read new review articles every Friday morning. Next week, we stick with the more modern horror of the early 21st century as I take a look at Rob Zombie's debut film, House of a Thousand Corpses. Until next week, stay spooky.